Welcome to another episode of the Film Nerd Podcast. This is episode 6, and I am joined by a special guest. My guest's name is Justin D'Agostino. Justin has been a friend of mine for 10 years now. I originally met him in college when we played football together at Hillsdale College in Hillsdale, Michigan. Justin now currently lives and works in Chicago, and he's a big movie guy. Him and I watched a lot of movies together in college, and we still, when we have time, I don't get to see him unfortunately as much as we used to, but when we can, we get to chat about movies here and there. Justin, how you doing, buddy? Welcome to the show here.
Thank you, Vince. Yep. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. How you
Doing well,
doing?
man. Doing well. Just hanging in there like everybody else.
Yeah, you navigating things down in Chicago okay in the midst of all the craziness over the last year?
Yeah, actually, you know what? I had to switch things up a little bit this weekend. Obviously, been confined to my apartment. So, Alex, my girlfriend and I, we stayed at a hotel last night just to switch things up.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. But things are good, man. Things are good.
Justin and I were talking before I started recording here. I didn't know that you did that. That's
Yeah.
that's fun. I guess trying in the midst of COVID, trying to find interesting things to do because I know I have talked to people who have just gone away for a weekend and just stayed in a hotel just to do something in terms of a quote unquote vacation.
Change the scene,
Yeah.
just something different. Exactly.
I can
Yeah.
relate to you there, man. Justin and I were just talking before I started here, and being a teacher, obviously, working at home on Zoom, I kind of get, the monotony of being at home every day and seeing just as much as I love my wife and my son, it can be a little boring not to have a variety of people to interact with, which is why I love doing this. This is my new outlet, in addition to being able to coach football, but. We'll jump into some things here. So I'm going to talk with Justin. I'm going to ask him a few questions in terms of some movie-going experiences over the last year, and then we're going to talk about a couple movies and the TV show WandaVision. So first, Justin, how's your movie-going experience been over the last year? And in terms of, my last couple guests, I talked with them each about their movie-going experience. Obviously, in
hmm
2020, much different than years past. But for you personally, how has it been? I guess first I'll kind of open it up. What was the last movie you saw before shutdown? Can you remember back in 2020, back in January, February,
Oh,
March?
that is a good question.
Mine was Invisible Man in February of last year before shutdown.
Invisible Man.
Yeah.
Okay. I honestly can't remember the
So if you can't
last
remember
one.
the one before shutdown, have you seen a movie since in theaters?
I have.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah?
So
What have you
obviously
seen?
the theaters were shut down for a few months and then they opened back up or whatever. And then I
And then
think
they shut
in
down in
Chicago they
Michigan.
shut
Oh, I
down
was gonna
again.
say, yeah, did they do that in
Yeah.
Illinois? Did they shut
Yeah.
things down again? Okay.
Yep, they shut down again, and the movie Tenet came
Yep.
out right around when theaters were starting to open up. So that is actually, I think that's the only movie I saw in theaters last year,
So in the
and
the
I went
last year,
twice.
in the last year, that's the only theatrical experience you've had is Tenet twice.
Yep, Tenet twice. Yeah, because
Okay.
that was such a good movie to see in theaters. You
You
know,
can't like.
um,
I feel like you have to see that one on a big screen.
have to see it on big
A
screen.
lot of
Yeah,
people were really upset with Christopher Nolan for him pushing as hard as he could to prevent that from going straight to digital. And I see both sides. I see people being upset with him, but I also understand like he spent years of his life making this film, and he's
hmm
dedicated to getting it seen, on the best. The best experience possible, and I just like you. That was the first movie I saw after the
hmm
shutdown. I actually drove with my buddy all the way to Indiana to see it in August because Michigan theaters
I
were
remember
closed.
you telling me that. Yeah,
Yep,
that's
I
right.
drove down
Yep.
to Indiana to see it. Just over the border to an NCG in August, and then I went and saw Tenet again when theaters opened in Michigan. I went to IMAX, Celebration IMAX,
So,
and saw it in
so you
like October, September.
So you saw it twice then,
Yeah.
also, and you
hmm
saw one in regular, one in IMAX. I
One
did
in
the
regular,
exact
one in
same thing.
IMAX.
I did
Yep.
the exact same thing. Yeah.
Because the first
So
time I went and saw it, I was like, I just got to see it in theaters. And then the second time, I was like, when I can see it in IMAX, I'm like, I got to see this in IMAX.
yeah, I don't really understand how some people are like, no, I don't like going to movie theaters. I'd rather just watch it at home. I'm like, it's a completely different experience.
And I talked
You know what I
about
mean?
this with my guest 2 weeks ago. How I get with some movies, there's some movies where it's like, yeah, if you got a decent, because I got a decent screen TV, I got like nearly a 60-inch television, HD TV with good surround sound, and you can see in my background, I'm a physical media purist with Blu-rays, so I got a pretty good experience at home. But like, I get there's some movies you don't need to see in the theater, but at the same time, a movie like a Tenet, why
Any
wouldn't you?
Christopher Nolan movie,
Oh yeah,
theaters,
oh yeah.
100%. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
and it
At
for
least,
that,
at least one of the, you
yeah,
obviously can rewatch it at home or anything. You don't need to see it every single
absolutely.
time in theaters, but the
No,
first time,
absolutely.
yeah.
And I actually got a copy of it for Christmas. My brother bought it for me for Christmas, so
Add it to your
on
collection.
4K Blu-ray. Yeah, so I'm excited to rewatch it on 4K Blu-ray at some point with
Do you
subtitles.
have every Christopher Nolan movie in your collection?
I do.
You
I
do?
do.
Yeah.
The only one I don't have on Blu-ray though is Memento and Insomnia. I have on DVD, unfortunately.
Okay.
But the rest I do have on Blu-ray. Even his first film, Following, I have on
Mm-hmm.
the Criterion Collection Blu-ray that he made when he was like a student, like just out of college. But
I
I
think I've
see.
seen that one.
You never seen Following?
I don't think so.
Gotta
No.
check. It's the one he did before Memento.
Okay.
It's a black
Memento's
and
obviously great.
oh yeah,
and awesome.
Memento's
Yeah.
great, but he made a movie before that called Following. That's like black and white, 75 minute movie. It's really short. He shot it with a bunch of buddies over the course of a month in London when he was like fresh out of film school, like trying to become a movie maker, and he shot in black and white because it was cheap. He had no money, so the black and white was not necessarily an aesthetic choice. It was a budget choice. He was trying to keep things cheap.
Interesting.
So if you've never seen Following, anyone listening, if Christopher Nolan's first film, definitely got to check it out.
Speaking of black and white films, this is the last thing before I cut you off too much here.
No, you're good.
There was a film that came out that was in black and white. It was with, but I don't know the basic premise, but it's like these two guys that are trapped at a lighthouse or stuck on an island.
Oh, The Lighthouse with Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson?
Called the Light? Yeah,
The Lighthouse, yeah. 2 years ago.
I have not seen that one, and
you gotta watch
that
it.
is one that's on my list. I definitely want to check that out.
Did you see? So the director Robert Eggers did The Witch, that came out in 2015.
Oh yeah, I saw The Witch. That was crazy.
It's the same director, same writer director. Yeah. No, yeah, he's got a new movie coming out either this year or next year called The Northman. That's like supposed to be like 1700s, like some Viking type thing or something. It sounds really good. But yeah, if you've never seen The Lighthouse, gotta check that out. So yeah, it sounds like then you haven't been able to see a lot of things in theaters. Obviously, most people haven't. I would encourage people, if you feel safe and you've gotten your vaccine and all that, definitely go. My wife and I actually just went this weekend and went and saw Minari. We went and saw Promising Young Woman at NCG a month ago. So I've been able to see two movies in the theaters this year in 2021 since they've opened back up. And buy some concessions, people. I'd encourage you, because most people complain about the price of theaters, but if you love the theater going experience, I feel like most people don't know they don't make their money off the tickets. The studios take just about all that money. They make their money off the concessions. So
get some popcorn.
We got some movie theater popcorn. We got some
loaded up with butter
and some peanut M&Ms, man. And Caroline got a water. And we want to. I want to support my local theater. So
what's interesting about the Chicago theaters? They have something where they mix. I don't know. I don't think all theaters do this, so I thought it was really interesting. Theater out here in Chicago, it mixes regular Cheetos and then Flamin' Hot Cheetos with popcorn. It's got two different things.
Ugh,
yeah.
That sounds gross.
Weird, right? Yeah,
I think that's
really
sounds
weird.
gross.
It's really weird. Yeah,
Like
don't get that.
Like a mix on the popcorn?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
yeah.
No thanks.
I wouldn't recommend that. Just get the regular popcorn.
So we'll move on here then. Well, let's go to the next thing. So my next question for Justin here, obviously with the theatrical experience kind of stunted over the last year and seems to hold true for you for the most part, like most people. I'm sure you've supplemented with streaming services, a lot of VOD, on demand, and Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime and Disney Plus and HBO Max. Obviously, more and more streaming services keep coming out. So, have you found yourself, even though you haven't gone to the movie theater as much as normal, have you found yourself maybe watching maybe even more shows and movies than ever before, just because of everything being pumped to streaming services and quarantine, being stuck at home? Do you feel that way or no?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I have literally every streaming service that you can have.
I was going to
say,
Hulu,
what do you
got?
have Apple TV, I have Apple Plus, whatever it's called. I have Disney. I have obviously Netflix, HBO Max, Amazon Prime or Video. I think that's about every single one of them. But yeah,
The
I
big
mean, at this
stuff. Yeah,
point,
there's some smaller
yeah,
things, but those are like the major ones at this
yeah,
point.
all the major ones for sure. And at this point, I have been watching just more shows, more movies, just to try something out that I haven't seen before. Like whether it's an
Do
older
you think,
movie or
yeah, so do you
whatever.
think you've ventured into maybe watching some things you never have before because you're like, I can't go to the theaters. I'm going to see what I got on this streaming service. See what I
Yeah, yeah,
maybe and then because everyone was stuck at home, I know I talked to a lot of people who are like, I watch things I've been wanting to watch forever and I was stuck at home, so I'm going to watch them now.
yeah. Like one show came out on HBO Max. I started watching. It's called like The Affair. You know,
Okay.
I just didn't have an interest in it before, and
Yeah.
I gave it a shot. Um, that's pretty interesting. But yeah, it's just like trying something new.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
what have been kind of your favorite? Obviously, you've used quite a few different streaming services. What have been your favorites that you've found have been kind of like maybe your most frequented of
hmm
the 6, 7, or 8 streaming services that are at your fingertips?
Surprisingly, not Netflix. I know that they're just pumping
They
out
keep
content.
losing. Well, and they're losing like famous IPs, right?
Yeah.
Because with Peacock,
hmm
NBC streaming service, they took back all the NBC shows.
hmm
Disney took back all their stuff with Disney Plus.
Yep.
HBO Max is partnered with Warner Brothers, so pretty much everything from Warner Brothers and everything HBO has. So Netflix is I mean, they got a lot of great original stuff, but they're going to
hmm
really have to hunker down on their original properties if they're going to compete with some of these companies that have like super well-known original properties. They're
For
like
sure.
a star. Obviously, Disney has endless, but so yeah,
hmm
what would have been your kind of go-tos?
I mean, I HBO Max has a lot of the not just movies, but the TV shows, the classic TV shows. They got some of the best ones on
Oh yeah,
there.
great
So I've
stuff.
even started like rewatching some of those, like Sopranos. Started, dabbling a little bit back into
I love
Sopranos.
that show.
But yeah, I would say HBO Max is probably HBO Max, and then Disney Plus too. In the last year, I've rewatched all the Marvel movies, so
I did that
done that.
before Endgame. I rewatched all of them.
Yeah, did that again. Alex actually, she didn't see one of those movies. She saw like I
She'd
think
never seen any of them,
no, no,
so you
she
guys
saw
watched
like
them together.
I think she saw like Avengers: Infinity War, and that was it. So we just rewatched all of them. Yeah, so I was probably HBO Max, probably my go-to.
I just started and Justin and I are going to talk here in just a moment about a couple films that have been recently released to HBO Max and theaters at the same time. And in order for me to watch those, I just started an HBO Max account.
Yep.
Caroline and I had HBO a couple years ago to watch Game of Thrones, so I was paying for a subscription when Game of Thrones and the last few seasons. And then I'm a huge Curb Your Enthusiasm fan. Larry David's Curb Your Enthusiasm
Love
season
it.
11 came out
Love
like
it.
right before quarantine last year, January, February. So I think it was around we finished that season of Curb Your Enthusiasm and I canceled it about a year ago.
I
Because
imagine
I
that's
was
exactly how he is in real life, Larry
Oh,
David.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Justin and I already know we're gonna have some more episodes because I feel like Justin and I are gonna have endless shows and movies that we want to talk about. Because I could get
Yeah.
into a whole tangent here on Curb Your Enthusiasm, but
Oh yeah.
but I had canceled HBO, so I recently started back with their announcement. For me personally, I'm a purist. I want to be able to go experience a lot of these movies at the theater. I want to support them financially, the creators. But at the same time, I'm realistic. My wife is pregnant with our second kid. I don't know how often I'm gonna be able to get. We moved to a new house in the fall that's a little bit further away from my favorite theater. Instead of just around the corner, I'm now like 20 minutes away from it. So it's not realistic for me to go frequent the movie theater like I used to. So having HBO Max, where they're gonna put all their stuff on streaming, personally, I'm all for it. And I Justin and I have seen a lot of movies together when we were in college together, so he knows my feelings on assholes in the movie theater. So like I was really getting, over the last 5, 6 years, let's be honest, people have gotten worse and worse in the theaters, and part of me is hoping that this will just deter some of those people from going because those people don't want to be there anyway. They have nothing better to do. Like, I'm just gonna go to a movie with some friends. They're
hmm
not there to enjoy the movie. They're there to call attention to themselves and make a big scene. So
Yeah.
if you can avoid that kind of stuff, I'm all for it. I hope in the long run that maybe this doesn't completely take over. I really think theaters will be okay. There's a lot of people very worried about this, but I think they're going to be okay because again, like Justin and I just have mentioned, there's a lot of movies that people want to see in the theaters. I mean, you got to go see a movie like Tenet in the movie, Marvel movies, Star Wars movies. I mean, there's
Got
nothing
to.
better than opening night with a packed crowd and everyone, you can feel the tension and people are excited and clapping and cheering for big moments. I mean, the snap in Infinity War, the what was the line? Endgame, Captain.
Yeah.
I'm on your six, or what does he say to him? On your at your six, or whatever he says when he's behind, when the Falcon behind Captain America, Captain
Oh
on
yeah,
your
yeah,
six, and everyone
yeah,
starts going like those kind
yeah.
of moments. You never forget those being in a theater with a
Yeah,
big
through
group of
the
people.
his like whatever, his
His
headphone
earpiece.
headset or whatever. Yeah,
But
yeah.
those kind of experience, those like fun moments with a crowd and everyone freaking out, you don't get those at home. So I
Were
don't.
you when you saw that movie in theaters? Were you in a movie theater where everybody just started standing up and clapping when that happened?
People were
Everybody started coming
People
through.
weren't standing up, but people were clapping and cheering, and
I was in
it
a
was
movie
fun.
theater where people were like, "Yeah," just like
See, and
standing up and fist pumping, and I'm
and I
like, "All
wanted
right,
to
I guess."
well, okay, that's a little bit too much, but people were clapping and cheering in my theater. But I do want to distinguish. There's a difference between being a rude jerk and like calling attention to yourself in a theater and like the natural, like a crowd just like the energy feeds off of like big movie experiences like that. Like
Oh, the
that's fun.
reaction, yeah,
That's
the
fun.
reaction in Avengers
But
Endgame,
I'm talking
that's
about
completely
like
fine.
I
Yeah.
went and saw the movie Us, Jordan Peele's Us, which was one of my favorite movies of 2019. And I went and saw it twice, and the second time I saw it, there was people like commenting through the whole movie, like saying
Mhm.
stupid, like inane comments. Like that
Yeah.
kind of stuff like bugs me. That's why I don't see horror movies on opening nights anymore. I just don't. I'll go like Saturday or Sunday
You know
morning
what? That's
when
actually a
nobody's
good
there.
point. That's actually a good point. I feel like when you have that type of crowd in a movie, it's going to be a horror movie or something like
Well,
that. I don't
because
know why.
people's natural reaction to being scared is they deflect. They want to act like they're not scared. So if you get the wrong crowd, they feed off of that, and if you have the right group of people, I feel like they will only like encourage that behavior. And I've been in
Mm.
horror movies. I went and saw the movie Don't Breathe like in 2016 or 2015. I don't remember
It's one
whenever
about the blind
the
guy.
in Detroit. It takes place in
Yeah.
Detroit, and they're robbing this blind guy, and that was one of my worst theater experiences ever. There was multiple people. It wasn't even a packed crowd, but there was multiple people in there that wouldn't stop talking the whole time, and they were like commenting on everything that was happening. And I'm like,
It's annoying.
I didn't pay $8 to $10 to come see this movie to hear your stupid comments. Like now, if you're reacting like like you're screaming because you're scared or like laughing, or surprised or shocked, but like to be talking through the whole movie, everything you're seeing, I would have paid for the Blu-ray and listened to the audio commentary. I'm not
Yeah.
listening, and that's like insightful commentary. I don't want to hear some Joe Schmo's bitch. Don't go in there. That kind of stuff. Like I don't like. Shut up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Watch the
Anyway,
movie. Yeah.
yeah.
Don't be
Anyway,
selfish. Yeah.
that stuff drives me nuts. But let's move on to another topic here. So one thing I wanted to talk about with Justin, I was mentioning before we started here, something that I thought would be kind of uh, interesting to chat about, and that I hadn't really looked into. I normally don't care so much about the box office in a given year. But I do kind of follow it a little bit to see how some of my favorite movies are doing, what kind of money they're making, and just kind of out of curiosity, morbid curiosity, what movies are making the most money. So Justin hadn't looked at the box office for 2020, a year obviously that's kind of a landmark year in terms of movies just being pushed to the next year, things being canceled, things like that. So I thought it would be kind of fun to chat about, some of the numbers here. So
Hmm.
Justin said he hasn't looked at it. So this is gonna be a
Nope.
first reaction from Justin.
Yep.
So, obviously, looking at this list, the year was greatly affected by COVID-19. Many films were postponed. The list says, as a result, it is the first year since 2007 not to have a movie gross $1 billion in the box office. Okay, so
Wow.
at least one film every year since 2007 has grossed $1 billion at the box office, except for 2020. It's the first year since 2005 for a movie not to gross $900 million. First year since 2000 for a movie not to gross $600 million. It keeps going. First year since 1995 that a single film in the world at the box office did not gross $500 million.
Oh
So
my god.
it has been 25 years since a movie has not grossed $500 million at the
Well,
box
did a
office.
movie even come close to 500 million?
Yes, there was three films I'll continue because
Tenet.
this. There's three films worldwide that grossed over 400 million. So wait, hold on, but
Okay.
this it keeps going because this is also there's a little bit more that's interesting. This is the first year in the history of movies, so more than 100 years of movies, that only four of the 10 highest grossing films were from North America. The other six were Chinese or Japanese films.
Wow.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. It's the first time ever that the highest grossing film was not an American movie. First time ever. Amazing. Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about in the history of movies. It's never happened before. So here's the list, and I'm sure I couldn't have predicted it because I haven't heard of some of these films. I had to look them up. The highest grossing film of 2020 made 461 million. Only 3 films grossed over 400 million. Tenet didn't gross over 400 million. It grossed over 300 million. Tenet's kind of considered a box office bomb, unfortunately.
Yep.
The highest grossing film of 2020 grossed 461 million and change, and it was called The 800. And it is a Chinese production. It is a Chinese historical war drama. Apparently got good reviews. Sounds good. I have no idea where to watch it. I can't find anywhere to watch it online because it hasn't been released in U.S. theaters.
Interesting.
And it's not on streaming services.
Yeah, I've
Uh,
never.
the
Huh.
second highest grossing film was an American film. It was Bad Boys for Life,
Are you kidding
which
me?
I
No
believe
way.
came out before the pandemic. It was released in January. So because it came out before the pandemic, it made 426 million.
Hmm.
Third highest grossing, another Chinese film, a comedy film, a Chinese anthology comedy, 422 million called My People, My Homeland. Again, I don't know what it is. I've never heard of it. Fourth highest grossing film is a Japanese dark fantasy animated film that made 367 million called Demon Slayer.
Huh.
Fifth highest grossing film was Tenet. Tenet made
Okay.
363 million.
Okay.
Sonic the Hedgehog made 319 million. Uh, Doolittle, that terrible movie with Robert Downey Jr. back in January, made 245 million. 8 and 9 are both Chinese films. One is an animated film, one is a romantic drama, and then the 10th highest grossing film made over 200 million. It was the superhero film Birds of Prey. Which I didn't think was that bad of a movie. Actually, it was. I thought it was pretty decent. But yeah, so pretty fascinating. Um, what do you
Yeah.
think? What do you think
I
about that?
I mean that's exactly what I was like. Did a movie even come close to 500 million? That's because I've never even heard of these movies. You
The
know?
three that grossed over 400 million, only one of them was American. Bad Boys for
Yeah,
Life.
they're not. We don't even have access to them. And then Bad Boys for
Yep.
Life. You know, it got lucky on the timing there. But
Yep.
you know, in the COVID, when the COVID pandemic hit, I didn't think any movie came even close to 500 million. And then you see Tenet right there at 350. You said?
Well, 363 million and change, and that doesn't take into it. You got to remember that's box office only.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be curious to know how much money it's made since it's gone to VOD because now you can rent it online. I know it had really high Blu-ray and 4K Blu-ray sales. I know a lot of people I saw were buying it on Blu-ray and 4K because they didn't have a chance to see it in theaters and they wanted to see it on Blu-ray or 4K Blu-ray. I got it for Christmas on 4K Blu-ray. So that doesn't include those sales. So I'd be curious to know if it was the highest grossing physical media release and maybe highest grossing on-demand sales, rental sales. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. That'd
it's
be interesting.
I mean, um,
It
Tenet was
was well
over.
over 100 million, wasn't it?
Oh, I forgot. So Tenet is actually the most expensive original film ever made.
Yeah,
Do
that
you
doesn't
know?
surprise
Do you
me.
know how much it cost? Do you want to take a
Well,
wild guess?
I thought it was like I'll say 200 million.
200 million. Its
Was it?
budget is estimated at 200 million. That's a
Yeah.
great guess. You're right on.
Yeah. I thought I knew it was a
It is the
crazy figure, and then
most expensive original film ever made.
the
Because it's
first
not based on
weekend that it
anything.
came out. Yeah, I know. And then the first weekend that it came out, I mean, obviously, you know, with COVID, it didn't come anywhere near what they were anticipating.
Oh yeah.
Um, so I know that they were kind of in the hole on that for a while, probably.
Well, and I again, it's you can speculate on what Nolan. They kept pushing the date. It was supposed to come out in June or July. They pushed it by a couple weeks, and they pushed it by, I think it got pushed 3 or 4 times till it finally came out in August. And I think he should have waited. I think
Yeah.
he should have waited just a little bit longer, because then theaters really started opening back up again. Like a month or two. He had it pushed into August, and I know he was trying to do that to help theaters out, but get them open again. But I also don't think he realized, a lot of these theaters were not allowed to sell concessions. I don't know about in Illinois and Chicago for you,
Mhm.
but when I went to NCG in January, and when I went to Celebration IMAX back in September, October, they weren't allowed to sell concessions.
Hmm.
Or
Yeah,
wait, Celebration IMAX might have been in September, but
you were allowed to buy, popcorn, candy, whatever it is like that.
yeah, in Michigan,
And
they had it all. They had concessions shut down for a while. When
interesting.
my wife and when Carol and I just went this weekend, we concessions were open back up again, so we were allowed to buy concessions. But theaters, like I mentioned earlier, they don't make money off those tickets. So I know Christopher Nolan was like trying to help movie theaters out, but they don't make their money on that. They make their money on the concessions. So it's like,
Hmm.
I get you're trying to help them to get people to go, but I don't really know how much it really helped in the long run. And now I feel like when Caroline and I left the movie last night after we went and saw Minari, there was a lot of people there. There was a decent amount
Yeah.
of people. So like now I feel like it's not like what it was, a year ago.
Yeah.
But there's more people going, I feel like, now than we're going in August when things first opened up.
Hmm.
Um,
Starting to see
but
some more traction for
yeah,
sure. Yeah.
but again, I get what he was doing, but
Well, it's also like state specific with Michigan and
yep.
concessions, because in Illinois you could buy concessions. So I think generally
Well, yeah,
most theaters.
that's one thing in the United States that was different from worldwide. I know worldwide. I think the worldwide box office for that film did better than the North American box office, because
Yeah.
worldwide, a lot of places were just handling the pandemic. And granted, most countries don't have nearly as many people as we do. There's only 4 or 5 countries in the world that have more people than the United States. So most other countries didn't have quite what we did to deal with, but
Hmm.
they also had a better handle on it in general. So they were open, and the worldwide box office did better. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I mean, I don't know. What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
I enjoyed the movie, and that's actually, I guess that's a good segue into my last question here before we talk about a couple specific projects. So what would have been your? I talked about 2 weeks ago with my guest. I talked about some of my favorite movies of 2020. Would have been your kind of some of your favorites? How can you take a guess at how many 2020 releases that you think you've seen between VOD and I know obviously Tenet was the only
It's a good
theatrical movie you
question.
saw, but
Yeah.
do you think you've seen a couple dozen maybe?
It's a good question. I really don't know how many movies that I've seen. What I can tell you honestly is that looking back is that anytime I heard something was coming out and it was going to be available on one of the streaming services, then I
Mhm.
probably watched it.
Can you
Getting
think
to the
off the top of your
theater.
head like any of your favorites?
I mean, honestly, my favorite movie of 2020 was I really liked Tenet. I really enjoyed it. I mean, that was obviously
That's
the only movie I saw in theaters, and the theatrical experience
Yep.
of that movie was
That's
awesome.
gonna probably I got a few more on my watch list to do, but that's still I got that one at 6 for me right now. It'll be pretty firmly in my top 10.
You know what I was
I'd be
actually
surprised
thinking
if it
about?
dropped out.
Yeah, yeah. You know what I was actually thinking about doing with Tenet was, have you ever seen a movie in what's called 4DX?
I've heard that sounds familiar.
Yeah.
4DX.
So it's in a way it's similar to IMAX, where I think it's got a pretty big screen, a bigger screen than usual. The audio is pretty intense, and they have different ways to simulate what's going on in the movie,
Mm-hmm.
to like where you're sitting, obviously being in the audience. There's just some
Oh,
other things, like if the character is going through and it's really windy, they'll have
I
some type
know what you're
of.
talking about. I think I have
Yeah,
heard of this.
yeah. So
It's like
I was thinking
it's
about.
almost like an interactive kind of
It is.
experience,
In a way, it
right?
is, yeah. And I was thinking about watching a movie this year in 40. I've never seen a movie in 40X, but I thought Tenet would have been a
Do
great
you
movie
have
to
a
do.
movie theater near you in the Chicago
Yeah.
area that does that?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
I don't even. I'd have to look online because I'm
I
pretty
don't think
sure
every state has one. I think it's pretty
that's
new,
a pretty new
relatively.
thing, right? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's interesting. And yeah, that's one of my 2021 goals.
Go see a movie
So,
in 4DX. Okay, now that you
yeah.
mention, I think I have heard about it, but I'd
Hmm.
have to even look. I wonder if they're even like if I feel like if it's in Michigan, it's probably in Detroit or Grand Rapids, if
Yeah,
there's one,
probably.
not in the Lansing area. But
Yeah.
um, Do you have any other movies other than Tenet you can think of that that come to mind that stuck with you that you really enjoyed?
Mm, honestly, not off the top of my head. I mean, I know I've enjoyed one. I just can't think of one right now. What about you? Maybe that'll spark something for me.
Well, again, I haven't put out my list yet, but a few that I've really enjoyed is there's an Amazon Prime original called Sound of Metal. And I think you and I
Mm,
had texted about
yep.
a drum, heavy metal drummer who goes deaf, learns to deal with
Hmm.
that.
Yep.
Horror movie called Possessor that I really enjoyed. Couple Netflix originals, The Devil All the Time, and I'm Thinking of Ending Things. The
I've seen
four
both of those. I've seen both of those. Those
I
were good.
I've
Yeah,
seen
those
both
are
of them
different.
3 times actually because I watched both of them, and Justin and I talked about I run a club for our high school film club, and actually we watched both of them as part of the club,
Hmm.
so I've actually watched them 3 times. The 40-year-old version, Version. Yeah, play on 40-year-old virgin.
Yeah.
Is a really good Netflix film as well from a new time director I really enjoyed. Promising Young Woman that just came out with Carey Mulligan, came out at the end of last year, is a kind of a rape revenge thriller that's like super like it's really good. It's a
Yeah.
really good movie.
What's the name?
Um, Promising Young Woman.
Okay.
It's in theaters right now. I think it might be on VOD. I don't know if it's on any streaming services. Um, Obviously, I loved Borat. I loved the Borat sequel. I thought that was really
Oh yeah,
good.
of course. Yeah. Yeah. Loved
Another
it.
Netflix one, Da Five Bloods. I really enjoyed.
Yep. That was good.
Ma Rainey's
That was that
Ma
was
Rainey's
right
Black
before
Bottom too was on Netflix.
the Five Bloods. That was right before.
That was right
Um,
before things shut down, I think, or around the time. Yeah.
well, it was also right before passed away, right? The Five Bloods. That's with Black Panther actor. Sorry, I'm drawing a
No, no,
blank.
no, no. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. You're right. Chadwick Boseman
Yeah.
was into Five Bloods, but he passed away right before Ma Rainey's Black Bottom came out.
Got it. Okay. Yep.
Because he passed away in the fall, and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom came out in November or December. But
Yeah.
that they're
Okay.
both those films are on Netflix, really good too.
Yep.
And then another one that I keep telling people about is the Small Axe anthology film series that Steve McQueen did on Amazon Prime. He made 5 movies. Amazon Prime gave him money to make 5 movies. Yeah, Steve McQueen, the same
Wow.
director who did Widows and 12 Years a Slave,
Oh, okay.
um,
Gotcha.
and oh man, what other movie did he do recently? Oh, I can't remember right now off the top of my head. But and then a Hulu original film, Palm Springs with Andy Samberg. I thought was a pretty good movie. And there was a few documentaries and a few foreign films in there. There's an animated film on Apple TV Plus that I absolutely love called Wolf Walkers. That's really
Okay.
good too. But I think there was a lot of great films in 2020. Obviously, it wasn't the same kind of year as 2019.
Hmm.
2019 I think is one of the best years ever for movies. I thought it was really hard for me. I mean, I made a top 50 list that I put on social media last year because it was so hard for me to pick and choose movies because it was such a good. It was I saw so many good movies.
Yeah.
This year I will probably put together a top 25. There's just not. There's a lot of quality stuff, but not nearly to the extent as
Well,
there
also a lot of the
was.
movies that were supposed to come out last year got pushed to
A
this
lot
year,
of
right?
stuff got
So
pushed, and
this year
so
should be a
this
good one.
well, so the stuff that came out in 2020 was a lot harder to find. You couldn't just go to the
Yeah.
theater and pick from the marquee what you want to watch.
Hmm.
You had to go online and find out on VOD services or streaming services where are these movies, right?
Yeah.
What's a good movie? You'd have to go out of your way to figure it out. So you would have had to look a little bit harder to find stuff, I think, in 2020.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
But quality stuff was there, I would argue. So
Hmm.
we'll move on here then. Justin and I are going to talk about a couple projects here. The first one, he's been watching WandaVision. I've been watching WandaVision. What are we on now? Episode 7 here. I've talked about WandaVision with my last 2 guests as well. They both watched it. Episode 7 came out Friday night. Did you got
Hmm.
a chance to watch it?
I did watch it. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
where are you at on the show so far in terms of your enjoyment overall?
So obviously the beginning of it was I wasn't into it in the beginning. It was so different, but obviously it takes time to, build into it. So about I think at the end of episode 2, I kind of figured out like what I feel like I figured out like what type of what they were going for.
Yep.
And I called it early on, but I thought like obviously Wanda's the one kind of control. We can give spoilers here, right? It's
Yeah,
episode 7,
spoilers.
right?
Spoilers,
Yeah,
yep,
spoilers.
spoilers.
So
If you're not watching
um,
the show, I wouldn't listen, but we're going to talk
yeah,
about spoilers.
yeah,
WandaVision
exactly.
episode 7 here.
Yeah. But no, I'm starting to enjoy it a lot more than I did at the beginning. Like the first episode, I was like, what was this? And then also the episodes are pretty short too. So
Really
I wish they were a
short.
little
Yeah.
bit longer. I wish they were a little bit longer.
Well, and I
Um,
think it's testing people's patience because Disney Plus is taking a Netflix's approach to TV shows often ends up with them dumping a whole season at once, so you can binge the entire season. You know,
yeah.
obviously HBO with their content, they go week by week, but with a show like Game of Thrones, you get an hour plus long show or close to an hour. Disney Plus has taken a very traditional approach to the show, with it being, like a succinct 30-minute episode, like traditional television.
Yeah.
And even more, adding another layer to it, the show is within the TV show. They're homaging old sitcoms and old television shows,
Yeah.
with Wanda, recreating or creating this safe space for herself that's like living in the comfort of a sitcom, right? And
A TV show within a TV show.
yeah,
Very interesting
exactly.
concept, right?
And
Yeah.
each episode traverses a new decade.
Yeah.
It
Yep.
homages a
Well,
new
they started
decade.
out with like kind of like the I Love Lucy theme, right? And then it
Yeah, it was
just
like
progressed from there.
1950s, it was like
Yeah.
1950s, 1960s,
Yeah.
70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, because this
Yep.
new episode I think was Modern Family.
Mm-hmm.
I've never watched Modern Family, but I've seen clips of it. It seemed like Modern Family.
Yeah,
So
for sure. That's exactly what I
2010s,
thought.
the last episode was clearly Malcolm in the Middle.
Mm-hmm.
Very obviously 2000s Malcolm in the Middle. The 90s episode seemed like an homage to like Full House kind of deal, and each
Yeah.
episode, again, each subsequent episode, they've jumped generation to generation there.
Mm-hmm.
That's my favorite part of the show.
Mm-hmm. So, do you
I
know anything about the villain of the show?
No idea. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest, the show's kind of losing me.
Yeah.
I liked it more at the beginning. I'm kind of
Really?
opposite. Yeah, I liked
Okay.
the weirdness. I liked the bizarre. I liked that they didn't tell you what was going on. I kind of wish they would have kept that, because then I would have been more interested. They're
Mm-hmm.
losing me now because they've pretty much explained everything that's happening, and it's just the same Marvel shtick with kind of like a sticker on it, like of
Mm-hmm.
something somewhat new that they're trying to approach it with. So I
Yeah.
don't know. I was actually really struggling to watch this last episode personally, because I've kind of grown tired of them explain. They keep explaining everything, like, and I get there was kind of a tongue-in-cheek element at the end of this episode with, again, spoilers. It turns out that the neighbor, played by Catherine Hahn, is the villain
Mm-hmm.
apparently. But again, they spent the whole end of the episode just explaining, and I get it was a little tongue-in-cheek, like her doing a monologue, like I've been behind everything, and it was supposed to be like in a sitcom.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I was already kind of annoyed with how they explained everything with sword, and everything with sword is the least interesting part of the show. All
Yeah.
of the stuff with sword, because it's typical Marvel stuff. It's nothing new. I'm like, okay, you got this big organization trying to control the villains or the good guy, even the good guys, right? Because with Captain America: Civil War, you had Agents of Shield and all that stuff, trying to suppress them and prevent them from being superheroes. So it's like there's always some organization trying to prevent them from doing what they got to do, whether it's a good guy or a bad guy. So like
Yeah.
they're not interesting to me, and they're just kind of boring. I was more enjoying the exploration of Wanda's grief, because going into the show, if you cared about Marvel at all, you knew that she was grieving from the end of the final movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the
Yep.
most interesting part of the show, at least for me, was exploring her grief, and how they were showing, that they didn't have to explain the energy shield or the energy field that she was in. To me, I felt like that was obvious, that
Yeah. Yeah. For
either
sure.
someone had her in a deep sleep, or she self-induced some deep sleep, and this is
Yep.
all in her mind. And
That's what
maybe,
I mean when I said like episode 2. When I started figuring out, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what's
yeah,
going on here. She's creating this alternate reality for herself to help deal with what
the
happened.
only other possibility I thought there could be is there was some meta element, like with the whole Spider. They're starting to introduce this Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse thing,
Mm-hmm.
because they keep announcing that the MCU is going to have all this like multiverse, alternate reality stuff. So I was like, are they going to start introducing that? And maybe there's some meta element to this, but that was not at all what it was.
Well,
It's just
that's why I thought it was getting a little bit interesting after not this past episode, but the episode before with her brother
Pietro,
being
yeah.
yeah Pietro, but it was the X-Men
Evan
Pietro.
Peters. Well, and
Yeah,
that's so I talked about that with my buddy in the last episode too. Like they didn't spend any more time on that in this new episode, and I know
yeah,
there's 2 more episodes left, so
yeah.
they
He was
could.
barely in it.
Yeah, this
He
episode
was
they've
barely
only
in it.
mentioned him by name. This new one, I
Yeah,
don't think he never showed up in
he
episode
was at the
7 at all.
very end. He was at the very end. Remember? He was at the very end when is it Monica is her name?
Catherine Hahn's character, the villain, Agnes
Yeah,
Harkness or
so,
whatever Harkness or something.
somebody was they found a stairwell to the basement, and I think Pietro was like standing
Oh,
right there.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Okay.
right at the
So
end though.
yeah, that's right. They're right at the very end.
Yeah,
So I'm wondering what they'll do with that in the next couple episodes. But that's what I was talking with my
exactly.
buddy in the last episode is that's really the only interesting tidbit left in the show is where did the kids come from and where did he come from, because they've established that everyone in this field this like field of energy is a real person that she's like sucked in and brainwashed. Even Vision's body she stole and brought
Mhm.
in and like resurrected in this energy field. So where the heck did the kids come from? What are those? Are those just
Yeah,
in her mind? Do they not exist? Or like what's this thing with this Evan Peters dude? And they even openly acknowledge like she recast, that one character says she recast her brother, you know.
yeah, yeah.
So I that's the only thing to me that's left that's interesting.
I like that
I don't know.
they obviously took a chance with the show and trying to get people more
Yeah,
comfortable with.
with something unusual and different.
Yeah, exactly.
Way
Yeah, I do
different.
like that.
Way
Way
different.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I just wish they would have let go of their typical formula and need to like I don't want to use the word pander, but it is pandering. They're sitting there like I've said this in a couple episodes. They tap you on the forehead and explain everything to you. I'm like, dude, we get what's going on. Anyone who's invested in this universe at this point, they keep like repeating things that we already know. Like that moment when Vision's driving with the character with the glasses is from the Thor movies, and she
yeah,
like literally explains the end of the movie Endgame
yeah.
to him. And I
Hmm.
get that his character in the show doesn't remember anything, but it's like, who is this for other than him? Us? Because if it's for just him, I get it. But as an audience member, it's boring. It's boring
Yeah,
dialogue. Like we know
yeah.
all this
Well, it's
already.
boring because it didn't lead to anything in that episode, and it was
Yes.
just him getting up to speed, and then that was basically it.
It's a waste
Right?
of screen time. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
just it's uninteresting. I don't know.
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know. I'm gonna watch the last 2 episodes. There's 2 episodes left, and I do enjoy the MCU stuff overall. But
Is there only 2 episodes left? There's
I think
nine
it's
episodes.
9. I
Really?
thought I heard it was 9.
All right.
I could be wrong, but I swear I heard 9. But
Okay.
anyway, so you're enjoying it overall then?
I mean, it's something to watch, you know.
Yeah,
Like
it's
I
not
said.
like I've mentioned in a couple episodes. It's not my favorite Marvel thing. It's not the worst. It's definitely not like the worst thing. I think it's pretty middle of the road. I think it's something that I hope that in future stuff, if they do more of these TV shows, that they get a little bit more daring. But
Well, that's the thing with like Marvel is there are so many characters in Marvel. So I mean, with
yeah,
these TV shows, they could have so many down the road, and
yeah,
they just got to pick which ones that they want to use. You know what I mean?
yeah, they can, and
Yeah.
yeah, I'll be interested to see what they do because I worry
It
about.
could really work, or they could really kind
Well,
of
I
shoot
worry
themselves in the
about
foot.
burnout. I worry about
Yeah,
burnout because I'm worrying about that with Star Wars too. If you overdo it, it's going to get to a point where people just get bored with it. And I'm feeling that. I'm feeling
which
that
is
at this point.
that's exactly how I felt with the last Star Wars trilogy.
Well,
Unfortunately, I
oh yeah, and that's another whole nother conversation. But Disney,
yeah,
I think Disney is getting into that in general. I think they're trying to suck as much of this out, as much money out of this as they can. But I think they're overdoing it to the point where people are just going to get bored with it.
yeah,
There's some people that won't, but for me personally, I'm just losing interest.
yeah,
But
yeah. No,
anyway,
I hear you.
Justin and I are going to move on here to another topic. We're going to talk about a couple movies here real quick, and then we'll kind of wrap things up from there. But the first movie, all 3 of them, 2 of them Justin has seen. One of them I'm just going to talk about briefly because he has not had a chance to see it. The 2 films that we will talk about that are going to be heavy spoilers are The Little Things and Judas and the Black Messiah. So if you have not seen those films, please make sure that you see them before you listen because we are going to talk about spoilers. And I do want to mention, actually, and I think I will mention this one first because Justin hasn't seen it, but all 3 of these films are currently available on HBO Max. and with the Little Things and Judas and the Black Messiah currently in theaters as well. So you can see them at the movie theater if you don't have HBO Max. The first film I want to see that it's not currently at the cinema, but is on HBO Max is is the film An American Pickle, that is on HBO Max and came out last August actually. It is a comedy drama with Seth Rogen, who produced it as well. It might be one of the strangest premises, probably ever. I mean, there's some weird movies, but like if I'll just read the premise. So the premise of the film is Seth Rogen stars as an Eastern European Jewish immigrant in the early 1900s who moves to the US with his wife. He's working at a pickle factory. He falls into a vat of pickles as the factory is shut down. He is preserved in the brine perfectly, survives for 100 years, and wakes up in modern day New York and meets his great grandson, also played by Seth Rogen. It sounds like a movie that should have no business being any good, and it's got decent reviews, not great reviews, but more than somewhat positive. But I have seen some very negative reviews for this film, and personally, I think it's worth checking out. If you have HBO Max, An American Pickle, I think has a lot more heart and is a lot funnier and executed a lot better than its premise would suggest. It's not a perfect movie. It has problems. But I think what helps is it's like 85 minutes. It's just over an hour and 20 minutes long. It's super short. So with it being so short and having such a quick pace, I think that kind of helps as well.
I mean, you gotta go into the movie with the right expectations, right?
If you don't like Seth Rogen,
exactly.
You're not. I mean, it is all Seth Rogen. It is
Yeah.
two Seth Rogens.
Yeah.
So if you don't like Seth Rogen, you're gonna hate this film double because it's two Seth Rogens. I personally think he gives one of his best performances ever. I think his ability, again, it's a comedy drama, so it's got some serious moments, but it's with that premise, obviously, it's very tongue in cheek and very silly.
So it's basically the grandfather and the grandson interacting,
great grandfather,
and the great grandson interacting with each other.
Yep.
Okay.
He gets hooked up with him because it's his only living family member. The government finds for him after they discover him. He's on the news, and he lives with them, and it's basically them trying to get along and live together. And with his mindset from over 100 years ago, his values, and it does have some interesting commentary in terms of modern American society, versus 1900s American society. I mean, the film is not like some intelligent think piece, but it does actually say some interesting things in that regard, and it has some heart and it has some really funny moments, but it's also got some really dumb and eye-rolling moments. But the movie never takes itself too seriously. It never tries to explain things because obviously it doesn't make any sense. But it does have a lot of fun and it's entertaining. I think it's worth checking out, and it would probably go on my honorable mentions or guilty pleasures of 2020. So Justin hasn't seen that one, so we'll move on. But I just wanted to mention I had just seen it, so I thought
it's on my list. It's on my list.
I wanted to mention it because I think people should check it out if you got HBO Max.
Yeah.
An American Pickle is the name of the film. The next film we're going to talk about, Justin has seen. It is on HBO Max. This film and the next one are both on HBO Max. They are both in theaters as well right now. The first one we're going to talk about is the neo-noir crime thriller The Little Things, written and directed by John Lee Hancock. The film was actually originally written in 1993. So John Lee Hancock, most people might not recognize his name if I said it, but if I named you some of his films, you would absolutely know some of his films. He has directed films like The Rookie, The Alamo, The Blind Side, Saving Mr. Banks, The Founder, The Highwaymen. So he's directed a lot of films that are actually based on real life stories, a lot of popular Hollywood films. Nothing that I would say would fall on a favorites of mine. The Blind Side and The Rookie, I think are fine. They're okay movies. Most of the other movies he's credited on, I either haven't seen or wouldn't care to watch again. But I don't think he's ever made anything that I would necessarily say is bad. But I think it's very interesting if you look at some of those old films that he now is creating a crime thriller film. And then if you look a little bit deeper, you would find out, again, he actually wrote this film back in 1993 before he had made any films or really made a name for himself. It is written that he originally was trying to get Steven Spielberg to make this film. He had multiple other directors originally attached, and then he shelved it. He took the screen, he couldn't get it made the way he wanted, so he put it on a shelf and he sat on it for almost 3 decades. And then obviously he made some money, he made some movies, got famous, and he came back to it. Now, the reason I bring that up is because when the movie opens, it's set in 1990, and that kind of explains why it's set in 1990. He wrote the movie in the early 90s. And Justin and I are going to talk about this here. I'm going to ask him a few questions, but when you watch the movie, there is no reason for the film to be set in 1990. They never explore the 90s in any aesthetic reason. Like, the movie doesn't ever stop and explore why it's set in the 1990s. And there's, other than it being written at that time, there's no justification for it or any interesting aesthetic choice for it being set at that time. Because if I don't know about Justin, but for me, when I think back on watching the movie, there's no scenes or, sequence of events that scream the 90s or a reason for it being in the 90s, like exploring that decade. It just happens to be set in the 90s.
No, I would totally agree with that. Yeah.
I guess before I continue on, let me have you kind of share your overall thoughts on the movie, or if there's anything you'd want to, explore along that line.
Of course, yeah. I obviously drawn to the movie, hearing about when it was, the release date, definitely something that I wanted to watch. Being with Denzel, I'm drawing a blank on the other actor's name, but the guy that played Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody, that's one of my. I love that movie. I loved his performance in that movie, and so leading up to this movie, I had high hopes for it. Kind of goes back to my original point.
I know. I was very excited for this movie as well. I had high
Yeah.
expectations for it. My wife and
Yeah.
I saw trailers for it, commercials for it on TV. And I'm like, man, that looks good. Denzel.
Yep.
Jared Leto, I know has had some. I didn't like him as the Joker, but he's done some things that I've really enjoyed. Rami Malek has done some great things, so I was very interested.
Yeah, yeah,
And I love
obviously,
crime thriller movie. I don't know.
I have a feeling Jared Leto is probably just the weirdest dude in real life because he plays that role so well. He was in.
He's So yeah, what did you think about his performance in this? Because I have some thoughts.
I mean, yeah,
What did you think?
you can. I thought he played that role. I mean, he was decent. I thought the overall movie was decent.
Yeah.
He played the creepy. What was he supposed to do? He was supposed to play this creepy guy that really wasn't tied to.
Yeah, spoilers by the way for the little things.
Spoilers. Yeah, he was just supposed to play this creepy guy that really wasn't tied to the murders or anything.
The final
like that.
scene basically tells you that the message of the movie is kind of like to explore obsession, right? Your obsession with things.
Oh, for sure, that's the theme of the movie.
Oh,
obsession.
yeah, but by the end, you're kind of left really hollow with the reveal. I don't necessarily dislike the reveal, but the journey there is kind of boring. And Jared Leto does have some interesting moments that are fun to watch, but there's also some moments from him that are so silly.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's his fault. I think it might have been the dialogue that's written, because there are some genuinely like stupid lines.
Well, the dialogue for sure could have been better.
The poo-poo, there's something about poop, some line about poop that I was like, what? Like,
yeah.
He says some really silly, stupid things, and I'm like, dude.
Yeah. Well, to your point, like, it was written in the early 1990s, right? Yeah. So I'm wondering, did they make any updates at all? Or did they just?
It says if you go on Wikipedia, it says the first draft was written in 1993.
Interesting.
Before, decades later, he decided to make it himself, and he just waited basically 3 decades. So I would have to go on like IMDb or maybe look into any interviews to see if he made any more updates to the initial draft, if he changed anything based on Jared Leto being cast.
Yeah.
And I do give Jared Leto credit for trying. He does try very hard. I think he's very committed to it. And again, I don't know if it's a source material problem, but at times his performance was interesting, and then there was times where I thought it was just really silly.
Yeah, well, that's the entire movie for me, to be honest. I was like drawn in at points, and I was like,
I don't know. And then there was other times where it's like, where's this going?
Yeah. What I did like Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just say one thing that after I watched this movie and thought about that really stuck with me is it was 7 before 7, because obviously like the quintessential 90s crime thriller is 7.
Mm-hmm.
If you're thinking of like greatest crime thrillers of all time, or even like monumental films from the 90s, you're going to bring up the movie 7 with Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt. You have to. And obviously that film was written years later. If this film was written in the early 90s, 7 came out in what, 1997? 1998, 1996. So it came out years later. But I just kept finding myself going, I wish I was watching 7. I wish I was watching 7. Because something that the movie 7 does that this movie does not is they really explore the relationship and the, not so much the lives of, but the relationship of the two cops, right? And how different they are. And on top of that, how they explore the crimes, right? There's a lot of time in the movie 7 dedicated to them investigating the crimes, going to crime scenes, dealing with people and the victims affected from it. The killer is not ever revealed until like the final 20 minutes, you know, spoilers for the movie 7, Kevin Spacey is a cameo as the villain at the very end, right? He shows up at the very end of the movie. But that's at the very end. Like the suspense builds and builds and builds, and you're seeing this evidence build up and all this creepy stuff they're exploring. They don't ever explore anything in terms of evidence or crimes in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
They spend the whole movie trying to frame a guy who in the end didn't do it. So when I get that's like this overarching theme that the film's trying to convey is like the issue with obsession. But guess what movie does that even better? 2007, David Fincher's Zodiac.
Yeah.
Crime thriller that explores obsession. The killer's
That's
never
also
caught.
one of the best crime mysteries.
Exactly, but
movie
the
ever
killer,
made, yeah.
and spoilers for the movie Zodiac, but I mean, if you know the story of the Zodiac killer, he's never caught. The movie is an exploration of Jake Gyllenhaal, his character's obsession and getting lost, like a character study.
Yep.
This movie, The Little Things, doesn't ever do any of this.
No.
It's just boring.
Mm-hmm.
It tries really hard to be. It tries really hard to have like this creepy villain and then have like the rug pulled out from you, and I think the script spent too much time convinced that the ending was going to be this monumental moment.
I couldn't agree more with that. I could not agree more with that.
The ending's just like, okay.
You felt throughout the movie that it was like, okay, this has to be building up to something, and then you were just kind of like let down.
And it's so deflating. It's just like
Yeah.
Okay. And like I remember saying, okay, he killed this guy. He's not the killer.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying this is like a commentary on being obsessed.
Yeah.
But like I don't care because you never really spent time building up Denzel's character. Denzel's character's boring. You never spent time building up Rami Malek's character. His character's boring. Jared Leto's character is like a caricature. It's like this, he's just silly.
Yeah.
And not really that interesting.
Yeah.
You didn't really dive in depth into any of the crimes except for the one that happened to Denzel's character years ago. They keep showing flashbacks to, but even that is surface level. Like it's just a few scenes.
You didn't really find out until the very end anyway. You know, what really happened with them.
There's 2 reveals right at the end. What happens in real time and then what happened to Denzel's character.
Exactly. Yeah. And then they try to tie it all together and it just didn't mix. Yeah. One thing I thought was throughout the whole movie, you heard Denzel say it's the little things that get you caught.
Yeah, I know that. I thought
that was kind of interesting because at the beginning, it's like you feel like when he first said that he was referring to, obviously it's the serial killers or the murderers. It's the little things that get you caught. But then at the end, you kind of find out, it was, it's kind of tying it to what happened to him with, shooting the last victim and stuff like that.
So it's like the little things that help you get away with it too. Or convince his partner that they caught the killer because he sends him the beret. He gives him the beret that he bought.
Yeah, I called that right away too. By the way, I'm not tooting my own horn here.
I know. Caroline and I watched it and we're like, did he really find that in the apartment? It looks brand new.
Yeah, and then a scene later, you see him throwing away that package. Yeah,
I don't know. I like the score. I thought the music was pretty good. I remember liking like themes from the score. I thought the movie looked okay. I didn't think the camera work was anything interesting, but like the colors and the lighting and some of the stuff at night I thought was interesting. Mm-hmm. Everything else I thought was either okay or just not very good.
Yeah.
overall. I thought it was really
Yeah,
I thought it was disappointing.
it was a letdown for sure. Definitely was a letdown.
I was hoping the critics were wrong because I saw that there was like a lot of negative reviews for it or average reviews, and I was like, come, there's no way people are just hating on this.
It was also like the first film of like 2020 when people are like looking forward to, and you're like, we're turning
Yeah,
a new
like
leaf over, you
yeah,
know?
like
And
kind of like one that was marketed
yeah,
other than the one we're going to talk about next. Yeah, this
yeah,
one was very heavily marketed as well.
for sure. Yeah,
Um, so yeah, if you're done talking about, I'm ready to talk about the next one because I have
yeah.
actually.
Let's move on.
So we're gonna stop talking about the little things because we weren't big on it, but I'm excited to talk about this next one. So the next film, that is also currently on HBO Max, if you have it, and as well was just released in theaters. So if you don't have HBO Max, you could go to a movie theater to see it. Is the 2021? This will actually be on my 2020 list because, if you are not aware, the Oscars actually extended their submission period through the end of February, so this film counts and will likely it's been nominated for 2020 Golden Globes, likely going to be nominated for 2020 Oscars. It is the major directorial debut from Shaka King, Judas and the Black Messiah. So Shaka King does have a former feature film. It was a small movie. This is like his big studio debut. Judas and the Black Messiah is a not a true biopic. A lot of times biopics kind of focus on one person. This film is a more of a historical drama, biographical drama. I wouldn't call it a straight biopic. And it does kind of take some creative liberties in its presentation, but it's about Fred Hampton. And Justin and I were texting. Justin was not aware of the story of Fred Hampton, and I actually talked with some of my students who had watched this, and they didn't know about Fred Hampton. If you don't know who Fred Hampton was, he was the chairman of the Chicago or Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party. Again, that chapter was centered in Chicago. And the movie talks about how he was killed by the FBI and police. And it was due to an FBI informant, who is played, and Fred Hampton played brilliantly by Daniel Kaluuya, who was amazing in Get Out. He was amazing in Widows. He was amazing in Sicario. Daniel Kaluuya is a British actor who's just been in some great films, only gets better. And then the FBI informant, who, again, real life person as well, Bill O'Neill, is played by Lakeith Stanfield, another guy who was in Get Out.
Yep.
Sorry to Bother You. He's been in a lot of great stuff as well. Uncut Gems, Knives Out. Both these actors are just like kind of blooming and blowing up on the scene in movies right now. Jesse Plemons plays the FBI agent. Jesse Plemons, another kind of character actor who's in a lot of supporting roles. Brilliant in this film as well. And Shaka King, again, is the director. He co-wrote it with the help of a couple other guys. What'd you think, Justin? What'd you think of Judas and the Black Messiah?
I'm a fan. I'm a fan of the movie. Like I said, when we were texting, I wasn't aware with just like how young Fred Hampton was, and
21
like
when he was killed.
all
Yeah.
that he accomplished, and then also the informant. He was 17 when he was initially arrested, so he
Yep.
was in his late teens going through all this. I mean, it's a
Yep.
pretty wild story.
He
But
was
I was
like
I
a
was a huge
kid.
fan.
He's
Yeah,
basically like a kid.
he's literally a
I
child.
know.
Yeah.
I know. It's kind of fascinating looking into the story, and obviously Daniel Kaluuya and Lakeith Stanfield, the actors are not kids. You know, they're I think
Yeah.
Lakeith
They're
Stanfield's
in
like
their
our
late
age.
20s, something like that.
Lakeith
Yeah.
Stanfield's like our age. He's like 29 or 30, and I think Daniel Kaluuya's like in his early 30s. So obviously they're much older than the real life people they're playing.
Lakeith
But
was in Get Out as well, right? With
Lakeith plays the character who is brainwashed at the party and Get Out, who's the first who's kidnapped in the opening scene of the movie. That was
exactly.
like his big breakout role was in that
Yeah.
one, in that movie. One of his big breakout. He did something else before that, but I really enjoyed this movie as well. I traditionally my only problem with this film is the same problem I have traditionally with all movies like this, where they take real life stories and spin them into a movie, and that's just that I want more. You know what I mean? With any historical drama or true life story film, I always am left feeling like I want more. And that's not nothing against the filmmakers. That's my issue that I always have with these kinds of movies. I love how the film takes kind of an indirect approach to the story, though. The director in interviews has described it as like a cross between. He described it as a cross between The Departed and what did he call it? The Conformist, which is a film I have not seen. It's a 1970s political drama film. So he's basically like insinuating that this is like an action thriller betrayal film like The Departed, if you've never seen The Departed. And then,
Gotta see The Departed if you haven't.
but then like spun into like a real life story, political drama kind of deal.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and I also like the metaphorical title of the film and how that's kind of played out.
Oh yeah.
If you're religious, you know who Judas is. He betrays Jesus, and Jesus is considered a Messiah. So Judas and the Black Messiah. Fred Hampton being African American. I mean, it's a very interesting title.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard some complaints. Some people have. I was listening to some other film podcasts and critics that I enjoy listening to, and some people wishing that there was more of a dichotomy or more of a relationship between the characters of Bill O'Neill and Fred Hampton, but that again, that's not the real story, and I don't think that's the point of the film. I think the point of the film is how opposite those two characters are, and then how by the end Bill is kind of drawn in to Fred Hampton's rhetoric, right? How
Mm-hmm.
Fred Hampton is like this larger than life influential, super like influential figure, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
he knew how to bring people together, and I
And they
love
kind of
how the film explores that. How
yeah.
even at one point, like Bill O'Neill, who's this FBI informant who's been roped into trying to bring down Fred Hampton, you can see on his face like that scene where I am a revolutionary, you know, when they're
Yeah.
screaming, and you can see like, and I love when actors get to act as their like their character in the movie's acting,
Yeah.
right? So he's acting as this character, and the character is acting in the movie. I
Mm-hmm.
think those are some of the coolest performances. So like, but like, Lakeith Stanfield does such a great job of like bringing out those emotions, like and like this moment of panic when Jesse Plemons' character, the FBI guy that he's working for, is in like the crowd watching
Mm-hmm.
him, and he like smiles, like,
Yep.
"Oh, you're
Yep.
falling for this rhetoric. You're
And he
falling
looks
for
at
this
him.
stuff."
Yeah, because he looks at him right in the eye, and he's just like, "I am a revolutionary." You know, he's looking at him like directly at him. Yeah, it's
I
kind of
think
interesting.
that's a great moment.
I was reading something where the FBI agent, when he was there, like after obviously the crowd was cheering, "I am a revolutionary" a couple times. He even started like in real life. They interviewed him, and he said that he even started cheering, "I am a revolutionary." Obviously,
Oh,
he's
really?
trying to, yeah,
Blend in.
yeah,
In the
blend
movie,
in.
he does. His character is doing it too. He's
Yeah,
blending in.
thought it was interesting.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I really like this movie. It's gonna be high on my 2020 list. I'm gonna include it in my 2020 list, but um, again, I'm always left with films like this just wanting more. But I think
Mm-hmm.
what they give you is pretty great. And Shaka King is a director who his only other film is one I hadn't heard of. It was a small like independent film. But I'm excited to see what he does next. I mean, this was like his first big project. I think it's shot really well. It's directed well.
Yep.
There's some really great moments in terms of like camera movement, like the opening scene when he gets out of the car, Bill O'Neill, and he pretends he's an FBI agent to rob some guys at the beginning of the movie, rob them of a car,
Yeah.
right? And there's some great moments in that scene.
Mm-hmm.
I
Well,
really,
going into movies like this, I'm always like I'm not skeptical. I don't know if that's the right word,
mhm.
but movies that are based on something an historical event,
Yeah,
something that actually happened. I'm always like, okay, what's real? What actually happened? And then to
yes,
your point, like what's some of the creative liberties that like the director or whoever is like trying
yep.
to spin into the movie or tie into the movie. And from what I could see, a lot of it seems to be pretty accurate.
I did read that Shaka King and the couple of guys that helped him write the film wanted to be, and they brought in Fred Hampton's widow, and his
Yeah,
son, and his
yeah,
son is still alive. They brought them in as consultants, and they wanted to be as faithful to his memory,
yeah,
and they wanted their blessing on the film. So they were really trying to love and like portray him in a loving way, a
yeah.
faithful way. So I do think that's an interesting um, comment, and I always appreciate when filmmakers do try to be as faithful to the real life story as they can.
For
I mean,
sure.
they're going to have
Yeah,
to take some creative liberties. I mean, it's a Hollywood film. You got to be entertaining.
exactly.
You got
Yeah,
to
yeah,
create a cohesive 2-hour movie, whatever.
yeah, yeah. But there was like two things that immediately director of the FBI at the time,
J.
J.
Edgar
Edgar
Hoover,
Hoover.
yeah,
Yeah,
who's a larger than
I
life figure.
yeah for sure. And I was a little skeptical. I'm like, did he really know about what was going on? And I guess I think this month actually there were some documents that were released that he was aware of
There's
the
yeah,
assassination
if you do
attempt
some
and all those
if you
things.
do
Well,
some
not attempt,
research,
but
if you do some research, I mean, the moment the moment when Fred Hampton is killed and the police officers say, "Is he dead?" And then they shoot him and he goes, "Well, he's dead now." That
Yeah.
reportedly is word for word what she heard. She reported
Yeah.
in court. His widow reported in court that is, and it's a very important scene because the camera's like on her face.
Yep.
And she doesn't even cry. She's scared, but she knows they're going to kill him. She's
Yeah, for
accepted
sure.
it. I love
Yeah.
that scene because the character is so well played. I can't remember the actress name.
Yeah. I thought that they were gonna.
Dominique Fishback. She plays that scene very well.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I thought that they were gonna like, I don't know, quote unquote Hollywood it up, make it kind of like more of a shoot off at the end of that scene there. But
Yeah.
apparently that's exactly what happened. They just walked through the front door and they just started shooting.
Did you see that the police in real life, and they kind of showed a little bit in the movie. They don't go into a ton of details about it, but if you do some research, apparently the police, that precinct, brought a loss or like a criminal charges against all of those people when only one bullet was fired by the Black Panthers, and it was a reflex from the guard at the door being shot and killed in the head.
When they shot it 76 times or something
99.
Like that.
They recovered 99 bullets
God.
from the scene, and only one, which was fired into the ceiling, was from the Black Panthers because the guy was shot and killed immediately in the chest. So like his reflex, like when he was killed, was pulling the trigger and went into the ceiling. That's the only bullet that was fired from them, and they tried to bring criminal charges to them. It's unbelievable. Yeah, and I do like that a lot of these films that, kind of are talking about and discussing and detailing racial injustices of the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s were coming out this year and last year. Steve McQueen's Small Axe anthology series does this. Just Mercy with Jamie Foxx and what's his name? The actor who's the villain in Black Panther. Michael B. Jordan came out. That came out last year, January, February as well. And there's a lot of others I could name too, but
another one with like the Chicago police specifically, Trial of the Seven.
Trial of Chicago 7. So you're getting a lot of these films that are eerily reminiscent to things that we're going through now, and I think it's a reflection of filmmakers going, things haven't changed. I mean, they have a little bit, but not as much as people think. Yep. It's and even Spike Lee's Da 5 Bloods kind of gets into some of that stuff, and his film Black Klansman that came out a couple years ago gets into some of that. So I think they're very timely, they're very poignant as well. They're relevant to things going on, and they hit even harder because it's like you're watching, and this film came out, or this film is talking about something that happened decades ago, but it's like, wow, some of this stuff is still a problem, is still things that people are dealing with. So I think that makes it even more impactful as well, more timely and more important. But I really enjoy it overall, and I'm going to try to watch it again before I make my list. I do want to check it out again because I really enjoy watching it. But
I think I'll probably try to give it a watch too. So obviously at the end of the movie, the FBI informants they created that interview. I can't remember the what was the name of that documentary?
It was a PBS. It was a PBS documentary called. Oh man!
I feel like The Eye was in it or something like that.
Yeah. Oh man.
But while you're looking,
I know what you're talking about. I can't remember, but I know what you're talking about at the very end. There's a They show. Well, they open the film and end the film with footage with Lakeith Stanfield playing Bill O'Neill.
Yeah.
In the documentary when he's like in his 40s or whatever.
Yeah.
And then in the credits, once in like the epilogue when
it's
the
film
is over, it really is Bill O'Neill.
Yeah. But after that interview, they say that he committed suicide
that night. I think it was night.
Do you know how?
He walked out into traffic.
He walked out into traffic and got hit by a car, and they just called it a suicide. Yeah, I'm thinking, obviously you hear suicide. I'm not thinking that. I thought that was wild.
Well, I looked into it, and his wife apparently professed for years that he was not suicidal and that it was not a suicide, but they ruled it a suicide because apparently he tried to jump out of a window in a house that week, and someone stopped him. So they said he was acting suicidal before that, so that I think is why they ruled it a suicide. It is a very wild.
Well, they said that wasn't the first time that he walked down into a highway either. That they caught him. I was reading something that like he was caught walking on the highways. Like I
And
mean,
that's the only thing I kind of wish the film would have explored more. That would have been even more
the
interesting. And
aftermath.
yes, and I know the
Yeah,
film was already, the length. It wasn't
yeah, it
that
was 2 hours
long. It
leading
was
up to
over
that.
two
So
hours, a little bit,
yeah.
but I think another 20 to 30 minutes could have been even more interesting to explore Bill O'Neill's character after, maybe a few scenes to kind of delve into that a little bit more, because I think that is interesting that the real life person was like riddled with guilt
Oh, for
from
sure.
what he did, from leading to Fred Hampton's murder.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
yeah, it is a fascinating story. It is a movie that is well worth anyone's time to watch, and I really enjoyed it.
Me too. Me too. Definitely worth the watch. I'll probably watch it again, just like you said.
Absolutely.
You always catch things the second time you watch something
Yeah.
that you didn't catch the first time. So I'll definitely put that on my list.
Well, all right. I'll wrap things up here then. That was the last one I wanted to chat about. If you're listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify, obviously I got the video up on YouTube. You can watch on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, you can find the podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify. I believe I got it up on Amazon as well now. If you can't find any earlier episodes missing from Podcast Store, should be able to find all of them on YouTube. At Vince the Film Nerd podcast called the Film Nerd Podcast.
The film nerd.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you, Justin, for coming on tonight. I'm gonna have another guest very soon. I'd like to have Justin on again sometime soon as well. Justin D'Agostino, everyone. I'm Vince with the Film Nerd Podcast. Until next time,
Thanks, brother.
go watch some movies.